What is going on YouTube? This is Acid Roots. So I'm going to review the second album by Third Eye Blind. Basically, this project is called Blue, and it came out in the fall of 1999. Now, the thing about this particular album is the first Third Eye Blind album, the self-titled Third Eye Blind, came out in 1997, and that went 6 times platinum. Had a number of hits on there, like Semi-Charmed Life, some of those type ones, Jumper, some of those particular type ones. I want to say How's It Going to Be was another one. As a particular kind of, that particular album was a pop rock smash. I would have to say definitely a dominant album that lasted throughout 97, 98, and even a little bit of 1999 as far as that pitch can happen with it. But this band particularly didn't want to replicate that particular formula full blown as far as, but this band didn't want to replicate that particular formula for their 1999 album. So it kind of had some crotchety kind of, this album kind of had some crotchety kind of creation. It had some sparring with like, this album had some verbal sparring between band members as far as that pitch can happen with it, and the lead guitarist of this particular album left after this particular album as far as that pitch can happen with it. So it just had some differential pitches. The band recorded their parts separately, so this was not as quite as unified and quite as cohesive of a project in terms of like the unity that it probably could have had and such. And pretty much it almost supposedly didn't come out or some pitch like that as far as that particularly going to happen. It was kind of, it was a disappointment just because the 1997 album was just severe quality. Just really was something that probably could have been something on like Limp Bizkit territory and folks like that, and Smash Mouth kind of territory. Some of those type folks from like 97, 99, some of those type pitches, Sugar Ray, some of those type folks that were dominant like the pop rock kind of sound around that time. Just because 6 times platinum is really nothing to sneeze at. And I reviewed the Third Eye Blind album way back in June. I don't remember that album as full blown, but I do know that all the singles were pretty damn near hit quality. They were all basically ones that were all over like the Billboard 100, and just in like a pop rock kind, just in like a pop rock kind of appeal. It had a lot of potential and just overall just hit quality that it had. It definitely was some super stellar kind of stuff. I look after this project a little bit more subdued. I look after it does have the hits on here, but I just kind of look after the factor behind it. It's just kind of the fact that this album is not quite as hooky this time. It has the same malaise that the 1997 album had, but it just kind of has like, I feel like the strengths are just not replicated quite as well this particular time. They don't really try to aim for like the hookiness and the pop rock type sound of their 1997 album, which is unfortunate because I don't know why they wouldn't have wanted to do that. I think they didn't want to be pigeonholed, but as a result of them not wanting to be like their biggest album, it's kind of a disappointment that it just didn't replicate like that sheer kind of hit type feel. I mean, I feel like songs like on here, like Never Let You Go. I feel like this album's two biggest songs, which would be Never Let You Go and Deep Inside of You, do at least attempt to bring back some of those 1997 type vibes, but it just does not have the same energy. They just had a lot of good, affable kind of summer energy on songs like Semi-Charmed Life and some of those type ones, and How's It Going to Be. This project still very much retains the malaise of just like 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock p.m., just like after hours wind down as far as that pitch can happen. It's just like for some lazy Sunday, Monday, Tuesday type evenings as far as that pitch can happen. It's just after hours work malaise and stuff like that, just blue collar type fare. But this album just does not have a hit on the size of like Semi-Charmed Life. But this album just does not have a hit on the potential of Semi-Charmed Life, that just has that kind of poppy, kind of just affable, kind of glossy, just like appeal of it that just is inescapable and stuff like that. I'd have to suppose. Not to say this is a bad album, it's just not quite as full blown. But then I don't remember what I scored like Third Eye Blind from 1997. I'd have to say I think I gave that like a 6 or a 7 out of 10, which is about the same pitch that this particular album's going to get. I feel like the strengths are just not replicated. I feel like they have some strengths in here with some of these 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock type hazers as far as that pitch kind of happens with it. And they do have a decent potential for like song singles and stuff like that. But this is kind of the concept. I still don't feel like some of their up-tempo type numbers are quite as convincing, just for the most part, at least in terms of like standard rock, more less when they don't do alternative rock, when they try to do pop rock in terms of like something that like Foo Fighters would do, or something like Metallica would do, or something like Limp Bizkit would do, or Korn would do, something like that. Just those ones that kind of make you want to headbang, kind of step out a little bit in like a night sense. I mean, apart from anything, they just don't really deliver on that particular fold. And I kind of feel like some of these kind of stretching type I feel like some of these summer stretchers don't always work either. I mean, I like the kind of makeshift kind of after hours haze, but some of these ones that kind of go to be like traverse kind of stretchers that are just kind of like the malaise of just like a long car trip, something like that, or just like a real kind of malaise type one. There's a difference between like a down tempo stretcher and like a mid tempo kind of stretcher that just kind of has like that snap of a song like Semi-Charmed Life, or How's It Going to Be, or Never Let You Go, or Deep Inside of You. But there's just some kind of album cuts on here that just kind of drop the ball in a lot of ways, and just kind of subdues the particular album. Plus, this album is just not nearly as hooky, I'd have to suppose. That's just kind of the concept about it. But we'll go ahead and talk about some of the singles on here. There were 4 singles, but they just weren't as multi-platinum. Really, the biggest song off this album is Never Let You Go. Second closest one that got pretty The second closest one after that is Deep Inside of You, which was another decent kind of pop rock smash, but it was kind of in like the top 70 of like the Billboard 100 as opposed to like top 15, top 25 type single, like some of the ones off of Third Eye Blind from 97 kind of were. But these are still some solid singles. I recommend all four of the singles. I would have to say all these were like some rock chart kind of smashes, I'd have to say. So it's a good concept to get some of these. It's just kind of the fact that they're just not as immediate and overall as hooky and affable this time, I'd have to say. We'll go ahead and talk about some of these on here. So the first single was Anything. Basically, Anything is an out and about, almost grunge like hazer. I'd have to suppose pretty good concept to get that one in particular. It's like a good alternative rock hit, I would have to say, and this is just like a solid night venue kind of heater. I would definitely feel like. So this one has the concept of something that like Foo Fighters or this particular song has the concept of something that Foo Fighters or Nirvana would have done back in the 90s as far as that pitch can happen. So, I mean, this album is still technically 90s, despite the fact that it was only around for like a month and a half after the 90s were done, despite the fact that the 90s only had like a month and a half left in them by the time this album came out. So it's just a good concept. Get this one in particular. Definite one. This one has some good energy about it. This is one that's not quite as malaise, not quite as in a funk as much, or quite as normally just that makeshift kind of standard fatigue and stuff like that as far as that pitch. This one's not quite as malaise and just doesn't have like that standard kind of 4 o'clock p.m. type fatigue as far as that particular pitch kind of happens with it, but it is a nice peppy one. I mean, it does have some haze about it. I would have to say this is definitely some good alternative rock, something you'd expect from like Tonic or Marcy Playground, some of those type ones, some of those particular type pitches. A little bit of Foo Fighters just with little bit of Foo Fighters just with a lot more malaise towards it. Just some of those particular type ones. This is a good concept to kind of get some of this. Third Eye Blind, definitely one of those type ones. There's some other ones I can't really think of at this particular moment, but this is definitely a good concept. Maybe Sugar Ray, some of those type ones I'd have to say, but this does have some good pep about it. This is a pretty good night venue stretcher to kind of have, and just for some good pep to kind of step out and have some drinks in your system, stuff like that, I'd have to say. Never Let You Go is the second single. This is the largest single off the album, like I was saying. This is definite highlighted one. This is like a syrupy kind of late day malaise, I would feel like. This is definitely a hooky and memorable. The song is definitely very hooky and it has memorable riffage about it, I'd have to say. Definitely a pretty instantly recognizable riff, I'd have to suppose. This is just a highlight that continues to be heard even today, 20-something years later. I'd have to suppose pretty good concept for that in particular. This is a simple, effective kind of makeshift bop, I would have to say. So I definitely appreciate this one. This is one, when you think of Semi-Charmed Life, if you're looking for something else by Third Eye Blind, this is a good concept. This is probably one of the ones that's going to get played the most nowadays, I would have to say, apart from Semi-Charmed Life and How's It Going to Be and some of those type ones, I would definitely feel like. But it's just a good highlighted one. This was a top 15 single on the Billboard 100, so it didn't just do excellent on the rock charts, it also did good in like a pop rock sense. They definitely needed way more songs like this. Now, apparently, one of the band members that kind of had the argument with the band didn't want this song on the particular album, which I wonder how this album would have turned out if this song wouldn't have been on there. But I just kind of look after the concept of this is a pretty excellent song. This is definitely something. This one's kind of a little bit more mature, this overall kind of more refined type aspect of Third Eye Blind. I mean, it's still, this song Never Let You Go retains some of that 4 o'clock p.m., 6 o'clock p.m. type malaise that Third Eye Blind is known for as far as that particular pitch kind of has with it. It's just a good concept. Get this one in particular. Just some of that memorable type days that like vintage Third Eye Blind as far as that pitch kind of particularly happens with it. Just a good bop to kind of have. Just kind of the concept. It's just kind of a concept that there's not a ton of songs like it, I'd have to suppose, but it's still a pretty good concept. Get this one in particular. Definitely a pretty affable type one. Definitely needed way more songs like this. Like I was saying, it was just the concept of just saying that there is some good vowels about this particular album. It's just kind of the concept. It's just a lot more malaise. They just have a lot more lazy kind of lambentness about it. It just kind of, compared to the more ferocious energy of Third Eye Blind from 1997, this is some good stuff, but this is kind of the concept. It's just a lot more hazy. I suppose. So, I mean, I do like Third Eye Blind because they are known for their hazers as far as that pitch kind of particularly happens. Just things for like 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock p.m., some of those type evening type fairs. It's just kind of the concept that, you know, the energy was just, the energy in the singles in 1997 just had a lot more pep towards it. It's just probably more noticeable this time. You'll just notice that you'll just notice this time that there's only really 2 singles that kind of have like the same affability that brings you back to 1997. But there is still the four singles have quality. They're just not as energetic this time, I'd have to say. So it's a concept about it. But 10 Days Late is the third single. This is another highlighted one. This is definitely some dreary kind of 90s. 10 Days Late is the third single. It's definitely some dreary kind of 90s post-grunge like malaise, I'd have to say. This is pretty similar to Nirvana's Lithium from the early 90s, I'd have to suppose. Pretty good concept. Get that one in particular. This is just a good lazy kind of Sunday hazer, I'd have to say. Definitely appreciate this one. This is like another type. This is just another kind of malaise post-grunge type tune I'd have supposed. This once again great for like 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. This once again great for 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock p.m. Some of those type pitches, just some evening fare as far as that particularly kind of goes along with it. But that's basically 3 singles that kind of have that evening appetite. Now, Now, at least anything is like a good night venue type bop as far as that pitch kind of happens. But 3 out of 4 of these singles are just great for like 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock p.m. as far as that pitch kind of happens. Just some good wind down type music or just standard malaise as far as that pitch kind of happens. So Deep Inside of You is the fourth single. Speaking of that, just to be able to talk about this one. This is the second biggest song off this particular album, I'd have to say. It's a pretty nice one. It's a good companion piece to Never Let You Go, but it just doesn't quite have the same energy or overall hookiness that particular song, but still an excellent song. I wouldn't sleep on this particular song, I'd have to say. It's like a hazy kind of summer stretcher. I would feel like this is some sunset music, definitely, and it's just a lazy kind of makeshift kickback of a song. I would definitely feel like, and this is just a good wind down cut. So this is definitely a pretty affable type one. Should take you back to like 1997 with Third Eye Blind, some of those type pitches, but also some of also retain some of the energy of Never Let You Go and 10 Days Late. So all of these 3 out of 4 of these singles just particularly kind of have that evening kind of haze about them as far as that pitch kind of goes along with it. Just some good concepts, just the aspect behind it. But once again, the energy is just a lot lazier, I'd have to suppose. I do kind of miss the energy of Semi Charmed Life and some of those type ones and a little bit of how's it going to be, but I am at least glad that some of these songs were released on this particular album because I have at least heard a couple times Deep Inside of You on the radio just back in the day as far as that pitch kind of happens with it, but I can't recall too many times I've heard songs by Third Eye Blind past these initial 2 albums, minus apart from Third Eye Blind from 1997 and Blue from 1999. I can't think of too many times I've heard songs by Third Eye Blind out of the 90s, I'd have to suppose. So it's an interesting concept just because they were kind of, I don't want to say that they were a product of the 90s, but I just don't know how they fared after that because I think their next album came out in 2003, and I just don't remember the pitch behind that particular one. But this is some good stuff here. It's just kind of the concept that it's a lot more malaise, and it's just the energy is not quite as electric this time, I'd have to suppose. But there are some ones on here. It's just kind of the concept that they're just not chosen as singles, just between the internal battles of the band and stuff like that, and just some of this kind of lack of synchronization, I'd have to suppose. But it is an interesting concept of an album. I would have to say there is some good stuff on here. So just to talk about some of these, minus the 4 songs, basically there's 13 songs on this particular album. One is an instrumental, so that narrows it down to 12 songs. But out of those 13 or 12 songs, I'd have to say I wound up recommending 7. So I don't recommend the slow motion instrumental. So out of the 12 songs, I wound up recommending 7. I'll go ahead and recommend those. So the 7 songs would be Never Let You Go, 10 Days Late, Deep Inside of You, An Ode to Maybe, Anything, Wounded, and Farther. So basically, a real good highlight on here would be An Ode to Maybe. I would definitely feel like this almost could have been a single. I would have said this would have been a nice choice for like a 5th single, something like that, a good pitch. This is a pretty hooky type song, I'd have to say. This is a good day after hours bar hopping. This is a good day after hours bar hopping tune. I'd have to say this is an excellent, this is a good song to pair up with anything. These are some excellent kind of night venue type bops as far as that pitch kind of happens with it. This song is just a nice kind of night venue haze of a song, I would feel like, and this is just a lively pitch of energy, I would have to say, and it's a pretty boppish song, I'd have to suppose. So it's a pretty good concept for this one in particular. I do like the fact that Third Eye Blind had some good step out type songs. I do kind of feel like, I mean, it's just kind of here and there with Third Eye Blind's energy. I feel like the mastery of what they have best on this particular, on their first 2 albums is just these kind of 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 p.m. type hazers as far as that pitch kind of happens with it. They definitely have the master of some of those kind of wind down type singles as far as that pitch kind of happens, but they do have some other strengths that's just not quite as common. I of course was looking for another song like Semi Charmed Life or something like that, just with like the kind of pop rock type pep, but they don't necessarily have that this time. But they do have like some good night venue and kind of like pub type things, just stuff placed, just products of stuff that you would have heard songs like Nirvana and some of those type ones, and just the same product of places that you would have heard songs from Nirvana and Foo Fighters, some of those type pitches, just some of those alternative rock type tunes. Because I would say that Third Eye Blind is definitely some alternative rock. They just remind me of that more so than full blown post grunge, which would develop further in like the early 2000s, at least for folks like Nickelback and things like that. I'd have to say that this is just like some alternative rock that's just very similar to Foo Fighters and stuff like that, and folks like Tonic and some of those type folks, I'd have to say. So it's a good concept. An Ode to Maybe and Anything are 2 good concepts for that. And then Wounded's a pretty highlighted one. This is like a late day stretcher, I'd have to say. It's pretty similar to Deep Inside of You. I would definitely feel like this is just a solid kind of mid-pace endearment of a song, I'd have to say. And this song's pep just reminds me of their 1997 days, I'd have to suppose. So it's a dope concept. Get that one in particular. It's just one that's very similar to Deep Inside of You and 10 Days Late, some of those type ones. Just another 6 o'clock p.m. type stretcher as far as that pitch kind of has with it. This one just has that same lazy type malaise, like a sunny Sunday, Monday, Tuesday kind of evening, some pitch like that. I'd have to suppose just another highlighted one, just kind of third eye blind in their prime as far as that pitch, just doing the strengths that they're good at as far as that particular pitch kind of happens with it. Just another good concept one to kind of get there. Farther's another highlighted one. Definitely appreciate this one. This is like a vintage kind of third eye blind with like a getting ready to step out kind of pep. I would have to say this is just an energizing hype for like some night venues. I would have to say. This song is just some energizing hype for like some night venues, I'd have to say. So this is a pretty nice one. This is another one that kind of goes good with anything in an ode to maybe. This one kind of has like a nightclub type bounce and bop. Farther kind of has like a nightclub type feel about it. I'd have to say pretty good concept for like some evening type, pretty good concept for like some evening type appeal. I'd have to suppose just within that particular concept. It's also pretty good concept for like some evening type appeal. I'd have to say, and it's also pretty good concept for like a dance club and stuff like that. I'd have to say it's just a dope concept, kind of get some third eye blind just in a different pitch. I'd have to say I do appreciate some of these ones that are kind of a little bit more rousing just because they're normally known for like their hazers. I'd have to suppose, but it's just a dope concept, kind of get them out of their element a little bit. Because I don't remember saying some of these strengths out their 1997 album. I remember I liked that particular album, but I think I kind of wanted like some pep and just like a certain sense like semi-term life, and I didn't get that last time around. But I'd have to say, I don't know. It felt like they kind of managed to hone like some of these up tempo type numbers that are better for like a night venue and stuff like that, just for a little bit of bar hopping and things like that. Sports bars, some of those type pitches of just stepping out, having some drinks and stuff like that, and dance clubs just within that pitch. So the singles are kind of more oriented towards like the evening kind of wind down from work type fare, and the album cuts kind of have more, and a decent chunk of the album cuts has some nightclub appeal, I'd have to say. So it's a dope enough concept to get this one in particular. I mean, this is not a full blown slacking kind of album. I mean, this is not a full blown kind of slacking kind of album. It just doesn't deliver in terms of the singles. This time, I'd have to suppose this kind of has a different kind of more degrade. This kind of has a more blunt kind of aspect in terms of like the commercial appeal of this particular project kind of had. But to talk about some of these songs I didn't recommend on here, basically, I didn't appreciate the slow motion instrumental. That was originally going to be a song that was supposed to be about like school shootings and stuff like that, but they didn't put it on there because of the Columbine shooting that happened in early 1999. So that's the pitch behind that one. But the instrumental was really not that interesting. Didn't really appreciate that one at all. There's just some summer stretchers on here like Red Summer Sun and Camouflage that just didn't really work that well. Those were just kind of some duller type ones that just didn't really have the affability. I feel like I do like the kind of summer stretchers in terms of like a little bit more snap with songs like Never Let You Go and Deep Inside of You and 10 Days Late. Some of those type ones that kind of have like a more kind of affable, just kind of more commercial type format towards them work a lot better. But some of these album cuts just don't deliver quite as well, I'd have to say. I feel like Darkness was another kind of this malaise type one that just didn't really work that well. A Thousand Julys was just kind of an up tempo one that just didn't really deliver quite as well as it needed to. I mean, that one was trying to have like that one was trying to be like a summer festival type one, similar to like Anything and an Ode to Maybe and some of those type ones, but it just didn't deliver quite as well as that particular pitch. I mean, I'm at least glad for another up tempo type one to kind of have some pep towards it, but that one just was not quite as affable to me as far as that pitch going to happen. And then I'd have to say that Darwin. And I just didn't really appreciate the instrumentation arrangements of Darwin. I'd have to suppose that one was just not very affable. That one was just not a very affable type one, I'd have to suppose, just based upon that particular concept. So I'd have to say, me basically recommending 7 songs out of 13. Me basically recommending 7 songs out of 13 on this particular album. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to count the slow motion instrumental as part of the album just because it is an instrumental, and sometimes instrumentals do hit pretty heavily on certain albums, but this one was just particularly one that didn't. So I'd have to say, me basically recommending 7 songs out of 13 on this particular album. I'm going to go ahead and give this album like a 6.25 out of 10. I feel like that's about the score that I gave Third Eye Blind. I feel like that's about the score that I gave Third Eye Blind from 1997 back in June. I'd have to say, now this is a pretty stellar album here. It does have some great stuff. I do like all 4 of the singles, and I do appreciate like these kind of 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock p.m. type hazes that they kind of have for like some evening type fare for wind down type music and just some kind of malaise, kind of blue collar makeshift. They're pretty good at these particular ones, and they continue that in 1999. It's just the fact that they chose not to be pop rock this time. I feel like it kind of needed something to kind of contrast with some of that kind of malaise on here. I feel like there are some album cuts on here like Wounded, and there are some kind of album cuts on here like an Ode to Maybe and Farther that kind of somewhat convey that particular concept that maybe Third Eye Blind could have had some pep in like the singles, but they just didn't pull it off this time in terms of being able to do it. It just felt like this album was just a lot more malaise, probably due to the internal band problems and stuff like that, and the fact that this album did not almost didn't. And the fact that this album almost didn't come out, I'd have to say. So 6.25 out of 10. In terms of In terms of social score, that's kind of tricky. I think I'm going to give the social score like a 6.5 out of 10 because it does have some quality hits on here in terms of some of that. It's just kind of the concept that's just off to the wayside and it just doesn't capitalize on like the strengths that they needed to just because they chose to go in a direct kind of difference from their pop rock kind of appeal of 1997, which is kind of unfortunate just because they had a lot of appeal. That album went 6 tons platinum, so I didn't know what that album went 6 tons platinum, so I don't know why they didn't want to replicate it and try to improve upon that particular sound. I mean, they did do it and they did continue to have some further hits, but they only had 2 out of the 4 in terms of like pop rock appeal compared to having, but they only had 2 out of 4 compared to damn near having 5 back in 1997. So it's just kind of the concept. There are some hits on here and they definitely have some certain degree of strengths. They do have some night out kind of songs. They do have some good evening malaise as far as that pitch kind of happens with this. Just kind of the concept that not every single song hits. Some of these stretchers are just not quite as good this particular time. They just don't really capture. And there's just kind of some poor songs on here that kind of detract from the experience. It's just kind of a more ho hum type version. I mean, there is some good stuff on here, and the quality you do see some Third Eye Blind type strengths on here, but it's just kind of more ho hum and just kind of lackadaisical type approach to something that probably could have had more of an appetite and a little bit more voraciousness towards I would have liked, and that probably would have been better for it. I would have definitely thought I would have liked and definitely probably would have been better for it. I would have thought as far as that pitch can happen. But that's just the concept of it. In terms of the future, I don't know. In terms of the future, I don't really know full blown what Third Eye Blind has been up to. I mean, I think they dropped an album like in 2021 as far as that pitch kind of particularly kind of happens, but they only have like 5, 6, or 7 albums, something like that, since 1997. So it's this kind of the particular concept. They don't oftenly drop. I know they have an album in 2003, then they came out in 2009, something like that in particular. So they kind of have some gaps in between when they drop albums and such. It might be a while if it's only been since 2021, but I had to suppose I am going to get to some more of these. Hopefully they do have at least a few more hits on like their 2003 albums and stuff like that, because that's probably the next one I'm going to do. But this is a lackadaisical type album here, I'd have to say. It does have some quality, very lazy type malaise about it. This has some evening type fare and night type fare, but it's just kind of the concept. It's just kind of the concept that it's a little bit haphazard this time.